Hi, I'm Mark, 35, and I used to think I was emotionally bulletproof, until I caught my father-in-law in my garage installing a secret nanny cam. Without telling us. 2. Keep an eye on the baby. Yeah. That happened. Let me back up a little. My wife, Jenna, had just given birth to our daughter, Sophie. She was perfect. 8 pounds of squishy cheeks and gassy smiles and a cry that could melt steel beams. We were delirious, exhausted, floating somewhere between pure joy and total sleep-deprived madness. First-time parenting is a trip. Jenna's dad, Paul, had always been involved. One of those guys who read 3 books on child development and suddenly thinks he's a pediatrician. He wasn't malicious, but the man had zero concept of boundaries. He once rewired our thermostat because he thought the baby might get too warm during REM sleep. Sophie wasn't even born yet. Still, I tried to be gracious. He was Jenna's only surviving parent. He'd been a single dad after her mom died, and I respected the hell out of that. But respect does not mean trust falls and surveillance cameras. The day I found it was a Thursday. I'd taken a rare solo moment to escape to the garage, which had become my sanctuary. I was organizing tools when I noticed something weird tucked behind the row of motor oil bottles on the top shelf. A small black object, slightly angled. At first I thought it was a Bluetooth speaker. Then I picked it up. A Wi-Fi-enabled nanny cam. Lens pointed at the door leading into the house. It was on. I just stood there for a solid 30 seconds, trying to process the reality that someone had installed a live feed camera in my home. I checked the battery. Fully charged. This thing hadn't been sitting there long. I called Jenna immediately. She picked up on the second ring. Everything okay? Is Sophie? Did you install a nanny cam in the garage? What? No. Why would I? Wait. What? I explained. Slowly. She got very quiet. Okay, she said, exhaling. There's no way. My dad wouldn't. And then, like a movie, her voice dropped into a whisper. Unless what, Jenna? Unless he borrowed your keys yesterday while you were showering. He said he wanted to grab something from the car. I didn't think twice. The silence on the line was deafening. I'll handle it, she said finally. But I was already moving. Already checking the rest of the house. The nursery. The living room. Our bedroom. My skin was crawling. Sophie's diaper pail hadn't even filled once yet, and someone had already decided we needed digital monitoring. I found 2 more. One in the corner of the nursery, disguised as a digital clock. One on the bookshelf in the living room, facing the baby swing. All of them online. All of them discreet. All of them transmitting God knows where. By the time Jenna got home from the pediatrician, I was pacing the hallway with all 3 cameras in a grocery bag and a rage headache pounding behind my eyes. I want him out, I said before she even dropped her purse. And I want an explanation. You ever watch someone's heart break in real time? Because that's what Jenna looked like. She didn't defend him. Didn't argue. She just nodded, walked into the kitchen, and picked up the phone. Dad, she said, her voice clipped. Get over here. Now. And that was how we ended up on our couch, 45 minutes later, with Paul sitting across from us, looking more annoyed than guilty, and saying the words that would detonate the next 6 months of our lives. I just wanted to make sure you were doing everything right. It's not like I don't know what I'm doing. I raised Jenna, didn't I? He smiled like we were supposed to thank him. I looked at Jenna. She looked at me. And I realized something in that moment that would change everything. This wasn't about protecting Sophie. This was about control. And I was not about to raise my kid under surveillance. Paul didn't even flinch when I held up the bag of nanny cams. He actually had the gall to smile. Like this was all some quirky misunderstanding. Like I'd overreacted to catching a grown man spying on his daughter's family in their own home. You found them fast, he said, sipping the coffee he made himself in my kitchen. I was going to tell you eventually. Eventually. Not before installing covert surveillance equipment in my nursery, living room, and garage. Not before sneaking into my house while I was showering. Not before crossing every single boundary I hadn't even realized needed to be explicitly stated. Jenna, bless her, was still in shock. Dad, she said slowly, like she was speaking to a confused toddler. You pretended you were going to the car to get something, and instead, you snuck around our house and hid cameras. I was concerned, Paul said. You've both looked so tired. And sleep-deprived people make mistakes. I thought, if something went wrong and nobody saw it, God forbid, Sophie rolled off the couch or something, I'd never forgive myself for not stepping in. She's 6 weeks old, I said. And she's never been on the couch. Paul waved that off like it was a petty detail. I know you two are trying hard. But you don't have experience. I do. You're not her parent, I said through clenched teeth. We are. And you don't get to step in just because you feel anxious. That's not protecting. That's violating. Jenna looked like she might throw up. Have you been watching the feeds? Paul didn't answer right away. That hesitation was everything. How long? She asked. How long have you been watching? He shifted in his chair. Since Monday. It was Thursday. 4 whole days he'd been lurking in the digital corners of our lives, watching us try to figure out how to keep a human alive on 4 hours of sleep and a prayer. You watched me breastfeed, Jenna said quietly, her voice flat and cold. Paul had the decency to look uncomfortable. I didn't mean to. It's not like I was watching that. I just wanted to make sure the baby was okay. That you weren't falling asleep while holding her or... You violated my privacy, she said, voice rising now. You watched me in my pajamas at 3 a.m, crying over nipple cream and cluster feeding, and you didn't think to ask once if that was okay? You needed help, he said defensively. But you wouldn't accept it. You kept saying you were fine. Because you wouldn't listen when we said no, she shouted. Sophie, bless her timing, let out a wail from the nursery right then. It cut through the tension like a knife. I stood. I'm going to check on her. When I come back, Paul, you will not be here. Jenna didn't argue. She sat frozen on the couch, her jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscles twitch. When I came back 5 minutes later, Paul was still sitting there. You need to go, I said. I'll just give you both some time to cool off, he replied, standing like he was doing us a favor by leaving. You'll thank me one day when you realize how vulnerable you were. I didn't say anything. Just held the door open. As he crossed the threshold, he turned and added, You'll understand when Sophie's a teenager. You'll be begging for a way to monitor her then. I shut the door in his face. That night, Jenna cried harder than I'd ever seen her. The betrayal of it, her father, the man who raised her, secretly spying on her as a new mother, broke something deep. We lay in bed, Sophie in the bassinet beside us, and Jenna whispered, He doesn't get to come back from this. Does he? I didn't answer right away. Because the truth was, I didn't know. What I did know was this: we weren't safe as a family if we had to wonder who was watching us. 2 days later, Jenna mailed back the key to Paul's house and changed the locks on ours. He showed up 3 times that week. Once with flowers. Once with baby books. Once with a handwritten letter that began with, I forgive you. All 3 visits ended with us not answering the door. And then, the guilt campaign began. It started with texts. Little passive-aggressive landmines disguised as concern. Jenna, I understand you're overwhelmed, but isolating yourselves isn't healthy for Sophie. Babies need their grandparents too. Mark, I always thought you were the level-headed one. You really think this is a proportionate response to a misunderstanding? I didn't respond. Neither did Jenna. Silence was the only thing that seemed to make the message clear. Then came the letters. Every few days, a thick envelope would appear in our mailbox, addressed in Paul's neat cursive. Each one a 4-page manifesto of justification and manipulation. We stopped reading them after the 3rd one, but we kept them in a drawer just in case things escalated. Because at this point, it wasn't just uncomfortable, it was starting to feel unhinged. The final straw came 10 days later, on a breezy Saturday morning. Jenna had taken Sophie to her first mommy and me class while I stayed behind to finally do something about the backyard jungle we called a lawn. I had one AirPod in, mowing in long, satisfying stripes, when I noticed a shadow near the back gate. It was Paul. Standing at the edge of our yard like he belonged there, holding a cardboard box and smiling like he just dropped by for coffee. I shut off the mower, pulled the AirPod out. Are you kidding me right now? He lifted the box. I brought some of Jenna's baby things. Thought she might want to see them. Her first blanket, her old mobile. You need to leave. Mark, I just want to talk. No. I stepped forward, adrenaline already humming. You don't get to violate our privacy, manipulate our trust, and then show up here like nothing happened. He set the box down on the patio table. I'm trying to make amends. You can't keep her from me forever. I folded my arms. Watch me. Paul's eyes narrowed. This isn't just about Jenna. This is about you trying to control everything. You're the one turning her against me. That did it. I'm not turning her against anyone. I snapped. You did that all on your own. You broke into our home, installed cameras, and watched us without our consent. You violated your daughter's body and our child's space. And now you're playing the victim because we finally said enough? He took a step closer. You think you can raise her better than I raised Jenna? No, I said. I think I can raise her without spying on her like she's a lab experiment. He stared at me for a long beat, the silence stretching thin and sharp. Then he muttered, "Fine," and turned to leave. Just as he reached the gate, Jenna's car pulled into the driveway. Sophie was asleep in her carrier. Jenna stepped out and froze. She didn't say a word. Just stared at her father like he was a stranger. Paul raised a hand in a limp wave. Hi, sweetheart. Jenna didn't move. Why are you here? I brought your baby blanket, he said. I thought it might be meaningful. Meaningful? She let out a brittle laugh. You know what would be meaningful, Dad? You not breaking into our house and watching me feed my daughter at 3 a.m. His mouth opened. Closed. I didn't mean. I don't care what you meant, she said. What matters is what you did. And what you keep doing. Showing up. Sending letters. Ignoring every boundary we've laid out. Jenna, please, he said, and for a moment, his voice cracked. You're my daughter. I miss you. I miss the father I thought I had, she replied. But I'm starting to realize that version only existed because I didn't know better. Paul took a step back like she'd slapped him. She walked past him without another word, heading straight inside, the screen door slamming softly behind her. He stood there a moment longer, then turned and walked away, his shoulders hunched, his box of memories still sitting on our table. Inside, Jenna was crying again. But this time, it wasn't grief, it was release. Like she'd finally stopped trying to carry the emotional weight of both their histories. I didn't want it to come to this, she said, pressing her forehead to mine. But I don't think he's capable of understanding how wrong this is. I squeezed her hand. Then we stopped trying to make him understand. We just protect our peace. Later that night, I packed up the cameras, the letters, and the box of baby things, and locked them all in the attic. A monument to what we'd survived. But Paul wasn't done yet. 2 weeks later, we were served papers. He was suing us for grandparents' rights. When the envelope came, I thought it was another one of Paul's guilt trips in cursive. Jenna opened it at the kitchen table while Sophie gurgled in her bassinet, blissfully unaware that her grandfather was officially suing her parents. I'll never forget the sound Jenna made when she read the first line, somewhere between a scoff and a gasp. You've got to be kidding me, she said, shoving the papers toward me. Petition for visitation rights. Filed in Maricopa County Family Court. Paul Winchester versus Jenna and Mark Hines. I sat down hard. He actually went through with it. Apparently we're unfit to determine the nature of extended familial relationships. Jenna read aloud, her voice trembling with disbelief. And he's alleging that we've been willfully withholding access to the child despite repeated, reasonable attempts to establish a relationship. I begged him to respect our boundaries, she whispered. Now we're in court? I rubbed my face like that would somehow fix reality. He must have found some lawyer desperate enough for a retainer. Jenna stood and paced the kitchen. He knows what this means. The stress, the cost, the time. He's banking on us giving in. That we'll fold before we fight. He was wrong. We hired an attorney named Melissa who specialized in family law and had the temperament of a viper in a pencil skirt. This isn't uncommon, she said, flipping through the paperwork with clinical disinterest. Usually comes from divorced grandparents who feel cut out, but I've seen plenty of control freaks with entitlement issues pull this too. So we're not crazy? Jenna asked. Melissa snorted. No. But you're about to be. He's going to dredge up everything he can. Expect him to paint you both as mentally unstable, emotionally volatile, and probably part of some anti-grandparent cult. He watched me breastfeed without my consent, Jenna said. That's not exactly traditional bonding behavior. Melissa didn't blink. Which is why you're going to win. But it's going to suck. Court is a blunt instrument. There's no version of this where everyone walks away clean. Jenna swallowed. What if he wins? In Arizona? Melissa tapped her pen on the edge of the table. He'd have to prove that not seeing the child is actively harming her. And since she's still an infant who doesn't even know the word grandpa yet, the burden of proof's on him. Still, the next few weeks were a hell's cape. We gathered character references, therapy notes, digital logs of the nanny cam footage and texts. We gave statements. Attended mediations. Had our parenting questioned by someone who once thought pickle juice cured the flu. Paul, for his part, leaned into the performance. He showed up to mediation in a blazer, looking like a retired congressman, hand on his heart as he lamented being cut off from the only grandchild he may ever know. Jenna had to leave the room halfway through one session because he cried when he pulled out a framed photo of himself holding newborn Sophie, like he was auditioning for a role in a Hallmark film about misunderstood old men and the daughters who wronged them. The pressure built slowly but relentlessly. We barely slept. Jenna's postpartum anxiety, which had finally started to level out, came roaring back with a vengeance. Sophie caught her first cold. My job started to notice my distracted brain and missed meetings. And still Paul persisted. He left voicemails that ranged from tearful to threatening. One day, he sent a text to both of us. You've made me into the villain, but one day Sophie will know the truth. One day she'll ask why her grandfather wasn't at her birthday parties. I read that one out loud while Jenna nursed on the couch. She didn't even flinch. Then I'll show her the court transcripts. The hearing date landed like a hammer in the middle of our calendar, October 3rd. We spent the next 3 weeks prepping for war. Melissa coached us relentlessly. Stick to the facts. Don't take the bait. Show that you made multiple attempts to resolve this privately before it escalated. And do not cry on the stand. I glanced at Jenna. Does yelling count? Only if you want the judge to side with Paul, Melissa said dryly. When the day finally came, the courtroom was freezing, all beige walls and judgmental echoes. Paul sat across from us at the petitioner's table, looking frail in a way that felt calculated. His lawyer, some hotshot with a haircut that screamed TV legal drama, launched into a speech about legacy and generational bonding. I wanted to stand up and scream. He watched us through a camera in our ceiling vent. But instead I stayed seated. Let Jenna speak. Let Melissa do what she did best. When Jenna took the stand, the courtroom went silent. She spoke about the invasion. The broken trust. The fear of raising a child in a world where even home didn't feel private. She didn't shout. Didn't cry. Just told the truth with the calm fury of a woman who'd had enough. I'm not keeping Sophie from my father to be cruel, she said. I'm doing it to protect her. To teach her that she's allowed to say no. That her body, her space, and her privacy matter. Even when the person crossing the line is family. The judge didn't rule that day. Said they'd take it under advisement and issue a written decision. So we waited. 3 days of hell. Every ring of the doorbell made my heart jump. Every call from an unknown number made Jenna flinch. Then, on a Thursday afternoon, the decision came. Petition denied. The judge found no evidence of harm. Cited Paul's egregious disregard for parental authority, and ruled that he posed a potential disruption to the stability and well-being of the child's home environment. We'd won. But it didn't feel like a celebration. It felt like surviving a war. We didn't throw a party. We didn't pop champagne. We just sat in our living room, side by side on the couch, Jenna holding Sophie with one hand and gripping mine with the other, reading the judge's decision aloud while the sound of our daughter's tiny snores filled the space between each word. No evidence of harm. Disregard for parental authority. Potential disruption. Every sentence was a vindication, but it didn't take away what we'd lost. The trust. The peace. The illusion that family meant safety by default. Jenna exhaled shakily when she reached the end. It's over. I kissed the top of her head. It's over. Except it wasn't. Not really. Because lawsuits end on paper, but the emotional wreckage doesn't tidy itself into neat little paragraphs. And Paul, of course, couldn't let the last word belong to a court. 2 days later, an email arrived. Subject line, you may have won, but you've lost something more important. I almost didn't read it. But curiosity got the better of me. It was a 5-paragraph masterpiece of wounded pride and thinly veiled threats. You've shown your true colors. You've poisoned Jenna against her own father, robbed your daughter of the chance to have a loving grandfather, and all because you can't handle being challenged. One day, Sophie will look back at the early years of her life and see that I tried. That I fought for her. And she'll resent you for shutting the door. I didn't respond. I forwarded it to Melissa instead. Jenna didn't even want to see it. He's dead to me, she said, voice flat and final. I don't need more proof that we made the right call. But it wasn't that simple. Because family doesn't vanish just because you cut off communication. It echoes. It creeps. It tries to sneak in through the side door even after you bolt the front. It started with other relatives. Jenna's cousin texted to check in and casually mentioned how heartbroken Paul was. Her aunt called and asked if maybe there was a way to find common ground. Like this was a dispute over lasagna recipes and not covert surveillance. Even William, my father-in-law's brother, emailed a photo of Paul from 20 years ago holding Jenna as a baby with the line, "He wasn't always like this. Maybe he still isn't." It was like a campaign. A slow drip of nostalgia and guilt designed to erode the decision we've made. To gaslight us into forgetting what actually happened. But we didn't forget. Because every time we put Sophie to sleep, we remembered how it felt to wonder if someone was watching. Because every time we sat on our own couch and didn't flinch, we remembered what it took to reclaim that peace. We started therapy. Together and individually. Jenna talked a lot about grief, not just for the relationship with her father, but for the version of herself that still believed he could change. I talked about rage. About how powerless I'd felt watching someone try to bulldoze my home and then cry victim when I stood my ground. We both talked about Sophie. How we wanted her to grow up in a house where privacy was sacred. Where family meant mutual respect, not guilt-ridden obligation. Slowly, the tension began to lift. We started sleeping again. Eating full meals. Laughing without the undercurrent of dread. Sophie hit 4 months and learned to roll over. We filmed it. Just us. No cameras hidden in the ceiling. No one lurking in the digital background. Just our daughter, discovering she could move forward, all on her own. And for a while, it felt like we'd finally reached a new normal. Until Jenna's phone buzzed on a random Tuesday afternoon with a number she didn't recognize. She answered on instinct. It was the receptionist at St. Luke's Medical Center. "Hi, this is Marie calling to confirm Barbara Winchester's emergency contact. She listed you and your husband. She's here in the ER with chest pains and asked that you be notified." Jenna's face went pale. "I think you mean Paul Winchester." "Oh. I'm so sorry." "Yes, Paul. That's what I meant. He's awake and stable, but he insisted you be called. Said you're his only family?" Jenna hung up and stared at the wall for a long time. "He listed us," she said finally. "After everything, he still listed us." I didn't say anything. Just waited. And then she whispered, "What do we do now?" Because as much as we wanted to believe we were done with him, life doesn't always let you turn the page. Sometimes it rips it out and throws you into a chapter you weren't ready for. We sat in silence for a long time after that call. The air between us felt thick, like someone had turned the gravity up. Sophie was asleep in her swing, her tiny hands twitching in baby dreams while her parents sat frozen in the wake of a 3-sentence voicemail that cracked open a door we'd nailed shut. "I don't want to go," Jenna said finally. "You don't have to," I said immediately. "We have every right not to." "But what if—" She trailed off, pressing her fingers to her temples. "What if this is it? What if he's dying and we ignore it, and then 5 years from now Sophie asks about her grandfather and I have to say I let him die alone in a hospital bed? He didn't care when he let you sob alone in your nursery after discovering a camera hidden in the stuffed animal shelf. I know. Her voice cracked. I know. But it still feels like this invisible tether, like I'm 5 years old again, waiting for him to come home from a business trip with some dumb airport snow globe. I exhaled slowly. Look. We don't owe him forgiveness. We don't owe him a second chance. But if you want closure, if seeing him will help you move forward, I'll go with you. But if you want to stay here with our daughter and never look back, I'll support that too. Jenna stared at Sophie for a long moment. Then she said, I want to go. Just for me. Just once. So we went. St. Luke's was a short drive away, but it felt like crossing into another world. The beeping machines. The antiseptic air. The strange quiet that hospitals carry, like even the walls are tired. Paul was in room 204B. The nurse warned us he was stable but emotionally agitated. Apparently, he tried to convince the ER staff to call a lawyer before a doctor. When we walked in, he looked small. Not frail, not dying, but not the man who'd spent the last 3 months trying to steamroll our lives, either. His skin was sallow, his hair thinner, his eyes ringed with the kind of shadows that even narcissism can hide. Jenna stood in the doorway, arms crossed. He looked up and his whole face lit up in a pathetic flicker of hope. You came. We came, I corrected, stepping in behind her. Paul reached for the hospital table and fumbled to sit up straighter. It was a scare, that's all. Probably just reflux. They said it might be stress. You don't say, Jenna said deadpan. He tried to smile. I'm glad you're here. Don't be, she replied. I'm not here because I forgive you. I'm here because I needed to look you in the face and say, you lost me. For real. Not temporarily. Not until your next manipulation. You lost me, Dad. Paul blinked, caught off guard. Jenna. She stepped closer, still out of his reach. You could have been the world's greatest grandfather. You could have been the man who taught Sophie to ride a bike, who told her stories about me when I was her age. But instead, you tried to control us. You violated our trust. And then you dragged us through court because your feelings were hurt. I was scared, he said, and his voice finally cracked. I lost your mother so early, and then I was losing you too. I panicked. I didn't know how else to be close to you. Then you should have asked, she said. You should have just been honest instead of hiding behind technology and lawyers. He wiped his eyes with the thin hospital sheet. I'm sorry. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I am. Jenna looked at him for a long moment. Then she said something that stunned both of us. I believe you. Paul's eyes went wide. Mine probably did too. I believe you regret what you did. But regret isn't change. Regret is passive. Change is hard and ugly and takes time. He nodded slowly. I want to try. I really do. Then prove it, she said. Not to me. Not to Mark. Prove it to yourself. Get help. Get therapy. Stay out of our lives until you've done the work. Paul blinked hard. Can I see Sophie? No, she said softly. Not yet. Maybe not ever. That's not a punishment. That's a boundary. She gets to grow up in a house that feels safe. And you made it unsafe. He looked down at his lap. His hands twisted in the sheet like he was wringing water from it. I understand. We left not long after that. The nurse gave us a polite nod as we passed the station. Back in the car, Jenna buckled her seatbelt and stared straight ahead for a long moment. I don't know if that helped. It doesn't have to, I said. Closure's overrated. She smiled weakly. Still glad I went. I glanced in the back seat where Sophie was snoozing in her carrier, one tiny fist tucked under her chin like a philosopher mid-thought. She'll never remember this, I said. No, Jenna replied. But I will. And that's enough. We didn't hear from Paul for weeks after that. No letters. No calls. Just silence. And for the first time in months, it was a silence that felt like healing. The first real sign of change came in a plain white envelope. No return address. No dramatic cursive. Just Jenna and Mark, printed in block letters. Cautious, Jenna opened it at the dining table while I rocked Sophie, who was deep into her scream for no reason phase. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Typed. No grand declarations. No emotional grenades. Asterisk I've started therapy. Weekly sessions. I told the truth. No spin. No blaming. Just truth. It's harder than I thought. I know I've lost your trust, and maybe access to Sophie forever. I'm not asking for anything except the chance to be a better man, even if it's too late for me to be a better father. Thank you for protecting her, even from me. Asterisk. Paul. Jenna read it twice, then passed it to me without a word. Her face was unreadable, but her shoulders had dropped an inch. I don't know what this means, she whispered. But for the first time, it doesn't feel like a performance. We didn't rush to reply. We didn't rush to forgive. But we didn't throw it away either. Fall turned to winter. Sophie started sitting up, grinning at her own reflection in the mirror like she'd discovered a celebrity. We built a routine. We healed. And then one morning, Jenna looked at me over coffee and said, I think I'm ready to write back. She didn't offer visitation. She didn't unlock the gates. But she wrote a letter. 2 paragraphs. No accusations. No anger. Just a clear message. Keep going. We're watching. That was it. And somehow, it was everything. Winter melted into spring. Sophie turned 1, chubby legs wobbling across the living room like a tiny drunk pirate, arms raised in perpetual triumph. Her first word was, dog, not mama or dada, but we cheered like she'd won the Nobel Prize anyway. We threw a birthday party, small, backyard, no themes, no drama. Just the people who'd stayed when things got hard. Haley brought balloon animals. Jenna's coworker made cupcakes. My mom cried when Sophie smushed icing into her own face. We didn't invite Paul. And not out of spite. Just because we weren't ready. Maybe he wasn't either. But he sent a card. No gift, no check, no dramatic insert. Just a birthday card with a handwritten note that said, I hope she laughs more than she cries. And that she always knows her parents fought to protect that joy. Paul. Jenna read it once, then slipped it into Sophie's memory box without comment. That night, we sat out on the porch after Sophie went down. The monitor buzzed softly on the table between us, and for the first time in a long time, everything felt still. I used to think protecting her would mean building fences, Jenna said. But now I think it's more like gardening. I looked over. Gardening? Yeah. You plant boundaries. You water them with hard conversations. You pull the weeds of guilt and manipulation. And if you're lucky, eventually, something good grows. I reached over and took her hand. You've always had a better metaphor game than me. She smiled. You're the muscle. I'm the poetry. We didn't talk much after that. Just sat there, watching the stars over our quiet house, feeling something settle in our chests that hadn't been there in a long time. Not closure. Not forgiveness. Just peace. 6 months later, we let Paul meet Sophie again. Supervised. Short. No hugs unless she initiated. No cameras, obviously. He showed up with nothing but a paperback book and a bottle of hand sanitizer. He didn't cry. He didn't monologue. He just sat on the floor while Sophie stacked blocks and quietly said, You've grown. She ignored him, which felt about right. When she offered him a block, he didn't say a word, just took it gently, like it was something sacred. And maybe it was. A tiny plastic truce, handed over by the one person who didn't yet know the weight of it. We never went back to the way things were. But we found a new path. One with clear signs. Firm rules. And the courage to walk away if we had to. And that, I realized, was parenting. Not just changing diapers and sleep training and spoon-feeding purees. But drawing a line in the sand and saying, Here. Here is where my family begins. And anything that threatens it stops here. Because love isn't letting someone do whatever they want. Sometimes love is no. Sometimes love is a locked door. And sometimes, when you're very lucky, love is what finally walks back through it.